Good evening, I'm David Kramer with Alaska Weather. As always, please visit our website, weather.gov/Alaska, get any updates to the forecast, or check out any watches, warnings, or advisories that we might have out for your area. You can also call our weather info line at 1-800-472-0391, get any updates to the forecast through that means as well. You can email me at the address at the bottom of the screen, david.kramer@noaa.gov. I also want to mention that later in the program for our aviation segment, we will be joined by Peter Chan, who's one of our newest meteorologists here for our TV program. Taking a look now, we do have some cold air returning to a lot of the southern portions of the mainland. I want to highlight some of these areas. For Bethel on Tuesday, we saw some areas of highs getting up around 27, lows down to 4, but as we move into Wednesday and Thursday, those lows are going to drop into the negative numbers, as well as other locations around, especially down in the southwestern portion of the state, Antioch, Dillingham, Iliamna. Antioch is going to get all the way down to minus 13 for Wednesday morning, and only get up to around 16 degrees for those afternoon highs. All these locations expected to see lows below 0 Wednesday and Thursday. Some of that cold air coming back in. For our watches, warnings, advisories around the state, we'll start off in southeast Alaska, where we have 3 winter storm watches out. These are going to be in effect from Wednesday afternoon until Thursday morning for all 3 of these locations. We're going to see snow amounts in the highest areas, that's going to be closer towards the Juneau area, expected to be 4 to 8 inches. Other locations around Yakutat and Haines expected to see a little bit lower, but still quite a bit of snow expected. Again, this is Wednesday afternoon until Thursday morning. Highlighting the Juneau area here, we can see some of the individual numbers. 6 to 8 expected at the airport. Cohen Drive a little bit lower, 4 to 6 there. Eagle Crest 4 to 6, and downtown also 4 to 6. Again, this is Wednesday afternoon and through Thursday morning. Could expect some difficult travel conditions. As we look up to mainland Alaska and up along the Arctic coastline, we have several different winter weather advisories out. We'll start out with the ones out west for the Bering Strait area. This is going to be in effect until 9 p.m. this evening for areas of blowing snow, dropping visibilities down to a half mile or less at times. Up by Utqiagvik, this one should be expiring soon, 6 p.m. this evening, again for blowing snow conditions, dropping those visibilities down. Out by Kaktovik, this is going to be a little bit later actually. On Wednesday around midnight till Thursday around midnight, we are expecting some blowing snow conditions up there for Kaktovik area and Barter Island. Down in the Alaska Range and out by 40 Mile Country, we are expecting snow and blowing snow conditions. Highest snow amounts are, however, going to be in the Alaska Range. Could see snow amounts around 8 inches there, but through the passes, we are expecting some blowing snow conditions that could drop visibility for people along the highways throughout the Alaska Range, and out by 40 Mile Country, the blowing snow conditions are going to be there as well. All 3 of these are going to be late Wednesday into Thursday. For specific amounts and locations as well as wind speeds, please check our forecast out, weather.gov/Alaska, if your area was not mentioned specifically in any of these updates. Taking a look now at our satellite imagery, we'll start off actually up along the west coast of the state, where we can start to see some of the cloud cover of that trough moving through that's bringing in those blowing snow conditions to St. Lawrence Island and the Bering Strait. As we watch this again, we'll look down by Kodiak Island, especially areas farther to the south. We'll see this low pressure system tracking up from the south, bringing cloud cover and a lot of precipitation with it, headed towards Kodiak Island and the south central area. Then finally out over the Bering Sea and Aleutians, we can see quite a bit of snow showers out there with a weaker low south of the central Aleutian Islands, tracking to the north and east. Taking a look at the weather for the remainder of the day, staying out over the Bering Sea and Aleutians, widespread snow showers are expected for these locations. We have that weaker low south of the central Aleutian Islands, hoping to bring a little bit more snow cover to those areas. We have another low moving up towards Kodiak Island that we mentioned earlier, bringing up some moisture and some warmer air with it, bringing in some rain to the western portions of the Gulf of Alaska. However, Kodiak Island and much of south central should stay cold enough for snow, and that snow is going to extend up through the Alaska Range and into the interior as well. Our other trough along the west coast of the state that's going to bring some of those blowing snow conditions is moving in towards the Seward Peninsula area, extending snow cover out through much of the west coast north of the Kuskokwim Delta area and into the Brooks Range. Up along the Arctic coastline, we do have some isolated areas of snow up there as well. However, down in the Panhandle, high pressure is dominating the area, keeping much of the precipitation held off to the west, with that low that's further out to the west moving into the western portions of the Gulf of Alaska. But as we move into tonight, that region is going to push off further to the south and east, allowing that frontal system to start to make its way closer towards the central portions of the Gulf of Alaska. This is going to bring more rain to the central Gulf, as well as some continued snow for Kodiak Island, up through south central Alaska, and much of the interior as well. Our old trough that was along the west coast is going to push more into the Arctic coastline now, leaving some lingering snow showers along the west coast down through the YK Delta area. And then out through the Bering Sea and Aleutian Islands, we are expecting widespread snow showers that are going to extend down into the Alaska Peninsula as well. Down in the Panhandle area, high pressure still dominating out over northwest Canada, keeping precipitation at bay for tonight. But as we move into Wednesday, that high pressure is starting to diminish and push off to the east, allowing that frontal system that was out over the Gulf to push farther to the east, bringing some mix of rain and snow to areas along the Gulf, but snow to areas as we get closer towards Yakutat and up in the northern locations of the Panhandle. That low is going to move, or the center itself is going to move up into the far northern portions of the Gulf of Alaska, bringing in more snow to south central Alaska, extending up through much of the interior as well. A little bit drier, however, as we get to the west coast of the state with some of the northerly winds coming in, helping to bring in some of those colder temperatures that we saw earlier as well with that north flow, and a little bit drier, allowing for some clear skies to radiate out some of that heat at night, bringing in some colder temps to the southwestern portions of the state, as well as much of the west coast farther to the north. Out over the Bering Sea and Aleutian Islands, we are going to see continued snow showers expected. That's going to extend out over the Alaska Peninsula. For Thursday, a new system coming in from the west, bringing a mix of rain and snow to the western Aleutian Islands and some stronger winds as well with that push from the south. High pressure is keeping the central and eastern Aleutians a little bit drier on Thursday, but we are still going to see some snow out over southwest Alaska and the Alaska Peninsula. High pressure out over much of the northwestern portion of the state, but we are going to see some snow as good to areas farther to the east, extending down from that Kaktovik area down through the rest of the eastern mainland through south central Alaska, and continued precipitation for all of the Panhandle area. Mix of rain and snow as you get closer towards the Gulf, but areas farther to the north and farther inland are expected to see primarily snow. Moving into our temperatures, low temps for Wednesday morning in the Panhandle area, staying near freezing for areas right by the Gulf, but in the 20s for much of the rest of the Panhandle. For south central Alaska, interior locations are going to be in the 20s, areas near the water in the 30s, with the teens for the Copper River Basin. Up for the interior portions of the state, going to be in the teens near the Fairbanks area, but dropping down as we move both to the west and to the north. Going to see some below zero temperatures through the Brooks Range and all along the Arctic coastline, with the exception of Kaktovik, staying just above zero. Down the west coast of the state, quite a bit colder there. We are going to see temperatures dropping down into the minus teens. And as we move into southwest Alaska, we're going to be right around zero for much of the YK Delta area, colder farther to the north, getting a little bit warmer as we move farther to the south. As we get closer towards the Bristol Bay area, we're going to see temperatures in the single digits near Dillingham at 5, but getting into near 20 degrees for areas farther to the south and east. Iliamna is going to be down to 22 degrees. Near freezing for much of the Alaska Peninsula, and then near 30 for much of the Aleutian Islands, and 27 degrees for that low Wednesday morning for St. Paul. Wednesday afternoon highs in the Panhandle area, southern locations going to get up into the lower 40s, staying in the mid 30s rather, as we get to northern locations of the Panhandle. For south central Alaska, mid 30s along the North Gulf Coast and down into Kodiak Island area as well, near 30 for much of the rest of the interior locations of south central, and 28 degrees for Glen Allen. Afternoon highs in the interior, Fairbanks getting up to 25 degrees, dropping down again as we move to the west and to the north. Galena are only getting up to 14 degrees, and in the teens for much of the Brooks Range as well. Up along the Arctic coastline, getting above zero for eastern locations, staying below zero out west, and down the west coast we're also going to stay below zero. Down in southwest Alaska, we're going to see near 10 degrees for the YK Delta, in the 20s for the Bristol Bay area, and just above freezing for the Aleutian Islands and Alaska Peninsula. Thursday morning lows down in the Panhandle near freezing for southern locations, in the mid-20s for northern locations. In the teens for much of south central Alaska and interior locations, getting into the single digits. Down below zero for most all of the interior. Southeast going to be a little bit warmer, but dropping down to the minus 20s near the Brooks Range and along much of the Arctic coast, especially out west. Minus teens for the west coast as well. Down in the YK Delta area, minus teens, below zero for the Bristol Bay area, and mid-20s for much of the Aleutian Islands and Alaska Peninsula. Thursday afternoon highs getting up to near 40 for the Panhandle, colder farther to the north. In the lower 20s for much of the south central area. In the interiors, in the single digits and the southeastern locations, below zero for much of the rest of the interior and along the Arctic coastline. West coast going to progressively warm as we move farther to the south, getting into the teens for the YK Delta and Bristol Bay areas, and then above freezing for the Aleutian Islands.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
I'm meteorologist Peter Chan with the National Weather Service in Anchorage. Here's your flying weather for midweek. On Wednesday morning, there will be a band of IFR conditions from around Bethel on up into the Yukon Valley associated with a weakening frontal boundary. However, low pressure that'll be tracking northward off of Kodiak Island and the Kenai Peninsula will produce IFR conditions from those areas across Cook Inlet and to north of the Alaska Range. By Wednesday afternoon, a band of IFR conditions is expected from the northeast Arctic coast across the eastern Brooks Range through the Alaska Range, and then down into the northern Kenai Peninsula and extending eastward, at least at the beginning of the Panhandle there around Yakutat. And as we head into Thursday, still some pockets of lingering IFR in the southeast at Yakutat as well as Ketchikan, and also the northern Kenai Peninsula on up toward the Alaska Range and the North Slope and eastern Arctic coast, as well as over the Bering Sea. There could be IFR conditions from St. Lawrence down through St. Matthew. By Thursday, conditions will be improving, especially across the interior of Alaska, either VFR or MVFR, with perhaps a lingering pocket of IFR up there along the North Slope in the northeast, as well as way west in the Aleutian chain. Now, past conditions on Wednesday, Anaktuvuk is expected to be MVFR, Atigun MVFR to IFR, Lake Clark and Merrill both IFR, improving to VFR as that weakening frontal boundary gets through them. And then also the same at Rainy, IFR to VFR conditions. Windy Pass will be looking at IFR becoming MVFR. And further east, Isabel will deteriorate from MVFR to IFR conditions. And further east of there, Mentasta is looking to hold on to VFR conditions throughout the day, but keep in mind the further west and south you go, you'll be running to IFR conditions toward the coast and further west. Tanita, MVFR to IFR conditions, and then Portage, MVFR, becoming IFR with that low pressure system in vicinity. And further east, Chilkoot, VFR to MVFR, as will White, as we expect, again, some pockets of IFR conditions are possible in other areas like Yakutat, as well as down toward Ketchikan. Freezing levels will be highest out over the Gulf of Alaska, 2, 4, and 6,000 feet, and southeast to southerly milder flow ahead of the low pressure system that will be tracking northward into Prince William Sound. Otherwise, freezing levels are at the surface along the southeast and south central coast to just north of the eastern Aleutians. Best chance for some considerable moderate icing would be around the north end of Kodiak Island into Cook Inlet, the Kenai Peninsula, and Prince William Sound above 5,000 feet. Other areas, though, of isolated moderate icing above 4,000 feet across much of the east and also back through the Aleutian chain. Looking at jet stream level winds at 30,000 feet, notice the 140 knot wind max approaching the Gulf of Alaska there. That's helping to support that low pressure system that'll be moving into Prince William Sound. Otherwise, across the Alaska interior, generally 30 to 60 knot winds from the southwest. Out over the Alaska Peninsula, westerly 70 knot winds, and then out over the western Aleutians, 80 to 90 knot northwesterly winds. At 9,000 feet, you see the circulation situated above the Anchorage area with southwesterly flow moving onshore into the southeast peninsula at 45 to 55 knots. Back toward southwest Alaska, over the Alaska Peninsula, upwards to 55 knots around King Salmon and Homer. And then out back over the western portion of the state into the Bering Sea, winds upwards to 50 knots from the northwest. 3,000 foot level winds shows low pressure circulation near and just north of Prince William Sound, with strongest winds up to 55 knots at 3,000 feet over the south end of the Kenai Peninsula and the northern end of the Kodiak Island around Kodiak and Homer. Otherwise, back toward the west, generally 25 to 35 knot winds and 40 knot winds over the western Aleutians. Finally, turbulence will be most concentrated there in southwest and south central areas, especially along the coast and Cook Inlet below 6,000 feet. Also some pockets below 4,000 feet east of Norton Sound and Kotzebue, as well as down toward Unalaska and Dutch Harbor.
We try to provide everyone with the best forecast we can for snow, sleet, and ice in the winter with as much notice as we can. And we've made great strides in our forecasting over the years. However, given the complexity in winter weather forecasting, the first forecast simply won't be as good as the one closer to the event. As the event nears, our forecasts will become more precise.
Forecasts are updated constantly from days before the event until the precipitation actually begins. If you want the most accurate and up-to-date information, you have to check the forecast frequently.
It's very unlikely that any computer model snow amount forecast, especially days in advance, will be exactly right. Sometimes it's even difficult to forecast amounts the day of the event. Don't focus so much on exact numbers. Our forecast offices produce a range of possibilities available on each office's winter page.
Impacts from winter storms can vary a lot across even short distances, especially true in the terrain of the mountains, but even in areas with more subtle differences in elevation. Just because it's not bad where you are doesn't mean that it isn't bad just a short distance away.
There's often a small area, perhaps not bigger than a couple of counties, of heavy snow embedded within the larger area of precipitation. It is very difficult to pinpoint exactly where this area will occur in advance. That is why we give ranges and probabilities, and that is what we mean when we say isolated higher amounts.
Not all storms are the same. Some storms affect different areas in different ways, and even weaker storms can produce big impacts. The Winter Storm Severity Index is a product that uses threat levels to depict overall anticipated impacts to society due to winter weather.
You can be a citizen scientist. You can report the weather that is occurring at your location any time of day. Local National Weather Service forecast offices offer Skywarn Storm Spotter training, so you can become an official Skywarn Storm Spotter. The MPing app and website allows you to submit your report online. And for the most dedicated, you can join AKwx, where you can submit your daily precipitation report directly to the National Weather Service. Your ground truth helps us improve forecasts.
Did you know that a 1 to 2 degree temperature difference either at the surface or just a few hundred feet off the ground can make a big difference in whether we get rain, freezing rain, sleet, or snow? That's really hard to forecast when we don't have a lot of data, but thankfully we do have 92 upper air stations that release weather balloons at least twice a day.
Even if you live in warmer climates, it's important to know your winter precipitation types when traveling. Freezing rain is liquid rain that freezes when it hits the ground, creating a coat of ice on roads, walkways, trees, and power lines. Sleet is rain that freezes into ice pellets before reaching the ground.
Snow squalls are quick, intense bursts of heavy snow that are accompanied by gusty winds. They rapidly reduce visibility and can create treacherous travel. Snow squall warnings are issued for localized areas where snow squalls are expected in the next 30 to 60 minutes. As of December 2019, they are now sent as one of the wireless emergency alerts.
Know the differences between watches, warnings, and advisories. A winter storm warning means that confidence is high that a winter storm will produce heavy wintry precipitation and cause significant impacts. A winter storm watch means that confidence is medium and that a winter storm producing significant impacts is possible. A winter weather advisory means to exercise caution as light amounts of wintry precipitation will cause slick conditions and may impact travel.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Welcome back to the marine section of our forecast. We'll start off with a quick look at the ice edge. Of note, with the southerly winds that we have been seeing, some of the north-facing coastlines of some of our areas, including Nunavik Island, St. Lawrence Island, and for the southern portions of the Norton Sound area, that southerly flow has caused some polynyas on the north side of those land areas. And we are seeing some of the shore-fast ice also break up in those same locations. So if you are planning on travel out and around those areas, please be mindful of the changing shore-fast conditions that we are seeing with the southerly winds and polynyas forming on the north sides again. Taking a look at our marine forecast in southeast Alaska for Wednesday. In the inside waters, we are seeing south to southeast winds 10 to 15 knots. Out over the eastern portions of the Gulf, south to southwest winds 15 to 20 knots, picking up to 25 knots and becoming more southeasterly as we get closer towards Yakutat. And then in the far northern portions of the Gulf, southerly winds 40 knots with seas up to as high as 11 feet. On Thursday in the inside waters, southern locations 15 to 20 knots out of the south. Up inland canal area, southerly winds 25 knots. Out over the eastern portions of the Gulf, westerly winds 15 to 20 knots. And northern locations, southwest winds 20 to 25 knots. Seas up to as high as 17 feet, highest in the northern locations of the Gulf. As we move out over south central Alaska on Wednesday, northern locations, south to southeast winds 35 to 40 knots. As we get closer towards the Barren Islands area, westerly flow 35 to 45 knots. Strongest right around the Barren Islands. In Prince William Sound area, easterly winds 30 knots. And in the Cook Inlet area, northwesterly winds 20 to 30 knots, getting stronger as we get farther to the south. On Thursday, in Cook Inlet, northerly winds 10 to 20 knots, again stronger farther to the south. Around the Barren Islands area, we're going to see some storm force winds on the eastern side, northwest winds 50 knots, 45 knots on the western side. As we get up into the northern portions of the Gulf of Alaska, west to southwest winds 25 to 30 knots, and then northwest winds 20 knots in Prince William Sound. Seas highest down in the western portions of the Gulf, up to as high as 17 feet, also up to 17 feet in northern locations. For Wednesday for the Alaska Peninsula and Kodiak Island. Around Kodiak Island, west to northwest winds 35 knots. On the Bering side of the Alaska Peninsula, northwest winds 20 to 25 knots. On the Pacific side, 20 to 30 knots out of a westerly direction, strongest farther to the east. As we move into Thursday around Kodiak Island, west to northwest winds 30 to 40 knots, strongest on the eastern side of Kodiak Island. On the Bering side of the peninsula, west to northwest winds 30 knots, and then northwest winds 25 to 30 knots on the Pacific side. For Wednesday for the Aleutian Islands, starting with the eastern Aleutians, westerly winds 20 knots expected, becoming north 15 to 20 for much of the central Aleutians, a little bit stronger south of Atka, northerly winds 25 knots there, and then westerly winds for the western Aleutians around 20 knots. On Thursday, staying out by the western Aleutians, winds and seas picking up quite a bit with that new system coming in. Southerly winds 45 knots by the western Aleutians, seas up to as high as 20 feet, dropping down as we get closer towards the east side of Kiska, 35 knots out of the south. For the central Aleutian Islands, southwesterly winds 25 knots, and then for the eastern Aleutians, west to northwest winds 15 to 20 knots expected. Along the west coast of the state, starting up north in the Norton Sound area, westerly winds 25 knots. By St. Lawrence Island, west 15, northwest 15 north of Nunavik Island, becoming north 25 south of Nunavik Island. Out by St. Matthew Island area, southeast winds 25 knots, and then by the Pribilof Islands, northerly winds 15 knots expected. For Thursday up in the Norton Sound area, weaker winds south 10 and then southeast 15 by St. Lawrence Island. Around Nunavik Island 30 knots, but going to be quite a bit different on the north side, northeast winds, and on the south side, westerly winds. By St. Matthew Island area, southwest winds 25 knots, and then by the Pribilof Islands, westerly winds 30 knots with seas up to as high as 10 feet. Up along the Arctic coastline, way out east, we are seeing southeast winds 15 knots, but as we get closer towards Prudhoe Bay and further to the west, we're seeing west to northwest winds 20 knots, westerly winds 15 knots down the rest of the west coast. For Thursday along the Arctic coastline, westerly winds 10 knots near UAFTV, picking up to as high as 30 knots north of Kaktovik. Along the west coast, southerly winds 10 to 15 knots expected, becoming southeast by the strait, still at 15 knots. Quick recap for tonight's weather. System moving into the western portions of the Gulf of Alaska, extending some snow from Kodiak Island up through south central and the interior. West coast also going to see some continued snow, with some snow reaching up to the Arctic coastline as well. We have some winter weather advisories out for the Alaska Range, 40-mile country in the Bering Strait, and up along the Arctic coast in Kaktovik and also by UAFTV. Check those out on our website, weather.gov/Alaska. And then down in the Bering, we have some snow showers. Also in
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.